quorum yet, but why don't we, well, we'll wait until a few members show up and then we'll do the roll call. Welcome everyone. Today we are here to talk about the Cal Grant program. And as we all know, the Cal Grant program is critically important for California students. About 285,000 students are receiving some type of Cal Grant aid this year. And without this aid, many of these students obviously would have a great difficulty going to college and staying in college. The Cal Grant program is also imperative to the state economy. College graduates earn more than $1 million over their lifetime compared to those without a bachelor's degree. And there is data that suggests that for every dollar that the state spends on higher education, the state gets a net return of $4.50 in the form of increased taxes on graduates' earnings and avoided social service costs. This is nearly a $1.8 billion program, and so it's also important to check in frequently on how the program is working and who it's serving. Of particular interest today is how the implementation of the DREAM Act is coming. We also want to hear about who the program is not serving and whether improvements could be made to better serve our students in our state. Finally, we want to discuss ways in which we can make sure all students who could potentially receive Cal Grants or other financial aid are taking the steps necessary to apply for the aid. And so with that, I'd like to invite our first panel, Judy Hyman from the Legislative Analyst's Office, Diana Fuentes-Michel, Executive Director of the California Student Aid Commission, and Matthew Seha from the Department of Finance.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Assemblymember DeBobne. Judy Hyman, Legislative Analyst's Office. I'll provide some context about college costs and how students pay for them, describe the Cal Grant program, and highlight some of the recent developments in the financial aid landscape, including the Governor's Cal Grant budget proposals. Page 1 of your handout shows students' costs of attendance at the public segments. As you can see, living expenses make up the majority of student budgets. Tuition and fee levels account for most of the difference in total costs of attendance. Now, this includes just the student costs, not the overall subsidies that you provide to the segments, which help keep the tuition costs low. To pay these costs of attendance, students use a number of financial aid programs, which you can see on page 2 of the handout. Just for the students at the public segments, these total about $12 billion. More than half of that is in gift aid, which is grants and scholarships that students don't have to pay back. About a quarter of that gift aid is from Cal Grants. The larger shares are from federal Pell Grants and from institutional awards. In addition, students receive work-study, tax benefits, and student loans to help pay these costs. Page 3 provides some information about how students access this aid. The first step is for families to submit the FAFSA, the Federal Student Aid Application. And then the U.S. Department of Education determines an expected family contribution based on information in the FAFSA, including student family income, assets, number of kids in college, and other factors. Then the Campus Financial Aid Office determines the student's financial need, and that's defined as the cost of attendance for that particular campus minus the expected family contribution. The campus then proceeds to put together a package of financial aid to help meet that financial need. The first item in is always gift aid, starting with federal Pell Grants and Cal Grants that students may qualify for. And then if there's remaining need, the campuses will put in institutional aid. And there's also usually a student responsibility that students are expected to meet through part-time work and student borrowing. Altogether, these financial aid packages fully cover tuition for more than half of students at California's public colleges and universities. As a result, many students end up paying far less than the total cost of attendance. You can see on page 4 that the net cost that students pay, which is the total cost minus the gift aid, is more similar across the segments, even though the total costs differ significantly. As a result of this, for many students, going to community colleges or California State University is not significantly more affordable than attending UC, even though the total cost of attendance is much higher at UC than at the other segments. Page 5 of your handout summarizes the Cal Grant program, and you have complete descriptions of this in your agenda package, but just to highlight a few things to help you work your way through it, there are 3 main categories of Cal Grants. There are the entitlement programs, which guarantee Cal Grant A and B awards for eligible students. There's a competitive program which provides a limited number of Cal Grant A and B awards for students who don't qualify for the entitlement. And then there's the Cal Grant C program, which is specifically for students in occupational and technical programs. Within the entitlement program, there's a high school entitlement for recent high school graduates and a community college transfer entitlement for students transferring from the community colleges to a baccalaureate institution. In both of those programs, students can qualify for Cal Grant A or Cal Grant B. The main difference between those 2 awards, a number of differences. One is that to qualify for Cal Grant A, a student must have a higher high school grade point average and must be enrolled in an associate degree, baccalaureate, or transfer program. Cal Grant B awards have a lower income cap and can be used for shorter programs of at least 1 year in duration. Another major difference between A and B is in what they cover. Cal Grant A covers 4 years of full tuition at UC and CSU and contributions toward tuition at private colleges. And Cal Grant B provides an access award, which is a stipend for 4 years, or the equivalent for part-time students, and then after the freshman year also provides tuition coverage for students. This can get pretty confusing. The good news is that students don't necessarily need to understand all the different programs and all the different types of awards, because for students, application is fairly automatic. Students submit the FAFSA. The Student Aid Commission receives that FAFSA electronically from the federal government. Most high schools electronically submit the grade point average. The Student Aid Commission puts those 2 documents together and considers that a Cal Grant application, and then proceeds to determine which program, which type of award the student qualifies for, and if the student qualifies for more than one, which one's most beneficial for the student. So much of this is automated for students. Page 6 of your handout provides the basic eligibility criteria for both students and institutions. And this is provided, the full list is provided for your reference, but I'll just highlight a couple of things. Under student eligibility, students must be enrolled at least half-time and must maintain satisfactory academic progress. And those are 2 important design elements which help to ensure that students will be making progress toward degrees. Institutions also have to meet eligibility criteria to participate, and the main criteria here are that institutions must maintain a student loan default rate that's less than 15.5%, a graduation rate above 30%, and they must report certain information to the Student Aid Commission annually. As long as they meet these criteria, schools from all 3 public sectors, as well as nonprofit and for-profit institutions, can participate in Cal Grants, but the award amounts differ by segment. On page 7, you can see some of these differences. Students at UC primarily receive Cal Grant A, which provides that full tuition for 4 years. That's more than $12,000 annually. Students at CSU primarily receive Cal Grant B, which includes the Access Award, which is just below $1,500. And then after the first year, they receive the tuition award of about $5,500. At community colleges, students primarily receive the Cal Grant B, which includes that Access Award, and they do not receive a tuition award, but instead they receive a Board of Governors fee waiver. Students at nonprofit institutions and also at WASC-accredited for-profit institutions primarily receive Cal Grant A with tuition coverage of about $9,000 annually. Next year that goes down to about $8,000. At other for-profit institutions, students can receive Cal Grant A or B awards with the tuition component of $4,000, the access component if the student qualifies for Cal Grant B, Or many students use Cal Grant C awards at for-profit institutions, which provide up to about $3,000 altogether for tuition and books and supplies for occupational and vocational programs. Because of these different award amounts, the funding at each of the different segments is not proportional to the number of students in each segment. You can see this on page 8 of the handout, where, for example, more than 30% of Cal Grants go to community college students, but they represent 6% of total awards. And again, that's because community college students are receiving the Access Award. They're not receiving the larger tuition awards. The funding for Cal Grants at UC and CSU, which together receive about 3/4 of all the funding, is driven primarily by their tuition levels. And that's because the Cal Grant Award automatically rises to match any increases in tuition. As a result of this, overall Cal Grant spending grew significantly during the recession, as you can see on page 9. Between 2007-8 and 2011-12, Cal Grant expenditures about doubled from $800 million to $1.6 billion. And during that same period of time, tuition at UC and CSU almost doubled. Even though tuition has been flat since 11-12, you can see that costs are continuing to rise, and that's due primarily to increases in participation. Page 10 highlights some recent financial aid developments in the state. Beginning in 2011-12, statute has required students to recertify their income and assets each year as they renew their Cal Grants. Prior to that, it was required only when they first received an award. In addition, you limited institutional eligibility based on the student loan default rate and the graduation rate, and reduced the maximum award amounts except for the tuition awards at UC and CSU. You also enacted the California DREAM Act, which made certain students who are not legal residents of California eligible to receive both privately funded scholarships at the universities as well as state and institutional aid, including Cal Grants. And just last year, you passed the Middle Class Scholarship Program, which provides tuition assistance to UC and CSU students with family incomes up to $150,000. The governor's Cal Grant budget proposals this year assume that tuition will remain flat in the budget year, and that would be the 4th consecutive year at the same tuition level, so that will not drive further increases in Cal Grant expenditures. The budget does recognize higher Cal Grant costs because of participation increases, and the governor proposes one change in Cal Grant eligibility, and that's to allow students who become ineligible because their family income rises above the cap to become eligible again if their income falls below the cap within the 4-year window. We recommend adopting the Cal Grant augmentation as a normal workload increase, and we also recommend adopting the Cal Grant eligibility change. In addition, we wanted to call your attention to 2 outreach programs that are currently funded by a federal grant to the tune of about $8 million. These programs, the California Student Opportunity and Access Program, or CalSOAP, and Cash for College, have at various times been funded by General Fund or Student Loan Operating Fund. They're currently funded by a federal grant that will expire in September 2015, and we recommend that you ask the Student Aid Commission to evaluate the outcomes and effectiveness of these programs so that next year you can consider whether you would like to continue funding these programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we hear from all of our panelists before we open up for questions and answers. Before we go any further, why don't we call roll?
Mr. Marasucci?
Here.
Mr. Chavez?
Here.
Mr. DeBopne?
Here.
Mr. Nastande?
Here.
Mr. Ting?
Here.
All right, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Fuentes-Michel.
Good afternoon. I am Diana Fuentes-Michel, the Executive Director of the California Student Aid Commission. First, I want to thank the Chair and the members for the opportunity to participate in this session, providing an overview of the state Cal Grant program. The Commission administers not only the Cal Grant program, but another 11 other specialized programs, and we serve approximately 295,000 students in both public and private California colleges and universities in the state. The Cal Grant program, since its inception in 1955, has served over 2.3 million Californians. Since the legislature established a funding guarantee for high school seniors and certain community college transfer students in 2000, over 900,000 Californians have met both the financial and academic requirements and were offered a Cal Grant. The Cal Grant program funds are directed at supporting the state's goals of student access, equity, and choice for California students who, without financial assistance, would not be able to afford to attend college. More students today are applying for financial aid. California students are applying in higher numbers than they have in the past. This year, for the first time, Assembly Bill 540 students, otherwise known as undocumented students, also known as Dreamers, qualified for both the Cal Grant program and institutional aid. A recent EdTrust West study reported, in comparing the class of 2013 to the prior year, that there has been a 7% increase in not only the number of FAFSAs but DREAM applications filed, and an 8% increase in Cal Grant applications, which is those two applications, the GPA and the FAFSA, that were filed on behalf of students. As a consequence, students offered a Cal Grant last year increased 11%. More low-income students have prepared themselves for college beyond high school, and however, a significant number of these students do not enroll in our colleges and universities. These students represent our future. We need to do a better job in helping them reach their aspirations. As a first-generation college student, I received a Cal Grant B to attend Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, where I graduated 4 years later with a bachelor's degree. I understand from my own personal experience the value that a quality education can have in providing economic opportunity and social mobility. I also experienced the challenge of gaining the knowledge necessary to navigate the college admissions and financial aid processes and to succeed in enrolling without a family member with the college knowledge to help me shepherd my way through the process. The California Student Aid Commission supports the governor's proposed budget that funds $225 million for increases in the number of eligible students who receive a Cal Grant, including the AB 540 Dreamer students who now qualify. It also funds the first year of the middle class scholarship for students attending the university and the state university, and the proposal to reinstate the withdrawn Cal Grant renewal students who now meet current financial aid eligibility requirements. The Commission recently adopted in February policy priorities for this legislative session. The Commission recommends that the legislature take actions to ensure all students and their families, with particular attention to first-generation, historically underrepresented low-income students, that they get the information that they need and the application assistance that they need to apply for college and to receive financial aid in order for them to get the resources necessary in order to enroll in an eligible school of their choice, complete their degrees, and ultimately contribute to California's economy. This session, there are a number of measures, proposals to either expand the Cal Grant program. There is currently a proposal to expand the number of Cal Grant competitive awards, which we recently have taken a number of actions to improve our paid rate for the students who are currently eligible for the program. Measures to restore Cal Grant funding for those students who are enrolled in the state's nonprofit private institutions who have historically partnered with the state to enroll and graduate low-income and historically underrepresented students. And also proposals to require electronic GPA submission that will support the Commission's efforts to ensure that all students who need financial assistance to enroll in college get it. As the Chairman indicated, we have two very successful outreach programs that are supported by both public and private partnerships. The Cash for College program, which many of the members participate in through their own local district offices, as well as with relationships with colleges and universities and high schools in the state, as well as the CalSOAP program, which since 1978 has provided both federal, state partners, along with local partners, to achieve college admissions and financial assistance. The Commission currently receives federal funds for these programs. We support the legislative analyst's recommendation that an evaluation be done on these programs in order to ensure that consideration is given in the next budget to continue these efforts statewide. I want to talk a little bit and lastly about our grant delivery system. For those of you who are not aware, the Commission last year for the first time became a processor of financial aid applications. The California DREAM Act required the state of California to establish an application process that mimics or is identical to the federal FAFSA process. California Dreamers go through the same process that students who apply for the FAFSA, through the FAFSA application. And so the Commission supports that process by having the state of California ensure that those students meet the same criteria. Last year, we processed over 2.5 million FAFSAs and DREAM Act applications. We notified over 426,000 students of their eligibility to our programs. We distributed funds to over 295,000 students. And we need and must continue our efforts in the coming year by working to enhance our computer system known as the grant delivery system. We are currently working with the Department of Finance and the administration on a proposed upgrade to our technology. College campuses need improved and updated a system to better serve their students. Students need the ability to self-serve through a variety of menu options that help them manage their financial aid application and award process on a 24/7 basis. Our call center workload has dramatically increased as more students have called our call center at the Commission asking for help to assist their financial aid. An increase in our technology capability will help us assist in serving these students. As I mentioned, we're currently working on a feasibility report that will address all of these issues. As more low-income students apply for college, campuses are faced with having to serve more students. Building online tools and allowing campuses and students to help themselves will help motivate students to take steps that they need in order to get their financial aid and maintain their eligibility. Online tools for high schools in terms of the GPA submittal and the colleges will also help students complete the financial aid process for awards so that they can get their information as soon as possible so that families and students have the information they need to make decisions in a timely manner. We believe that the new system will help the Commission meet the increase in students' demand so that all eligible students will reach the goal of enrollment and success in completing their college education. I want to thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Fuentes Michelle. Again, we will hold off on questions until all panelists present, and so we have Mr. Seha from the Department of Finance.
Matthew Seha, Department of Finance. Briefly, I'll just go through the administration's proposal, January proposal. So overall, the governor's budget provides $1.76 billion for Cal grants in 2014-15, with an estimated 305,000 students to receive rewards. The budget includes several adjustments to financial aid programs totaling over $260 million of new general fund spending. And first, the budget includes $14.9 billion general fund for proposal to allow students who were previously disqualified from the Cal Grant program for financial reasons to reapply for a renewal award. And I'll talk a little further about this proposal in a moment. But the rest of the budget includes a first-year funding for the Middle Class Scholarship Program. And the statutory appropriation for the program in 2014-15 is $107 million general fund. The budget also includes over $100 million of increased general fund to reflect increased participation in the Cal Grant program of approximately 19,200 students over current year estimates. Approximately $28 million of this grant is attributable to the second year implementation of the DREAM Act. Lastly, the budget includes an additional $38 million of general fund to backfill an estimated decrease in the student loan operating funds, which offset general fund costs. As I previously mentioned, the governor's budget proposes to expand Cal Grant Renewal Award eligibility. The proposal is estimated to increase general fund costs by approximately $15 million and increase the number of students aided by approximately 2,030. In terms of the specifics to the proposal, under the administration's proposal, students who were previously denied a Cal Grant Renewal Award for financial reasons can reapply for the program as long as they're still within the 4 consecutive academic year window that the Cal Grant traditionally provides. Effectively, this means students can reapply for a renewal award if they have previously been denied a renewal award and has not been more than 3 years since they received their initial award as a new recipient. This proposal addresses an unintended consequence of re-verifying a Cal Grant Renewal Award eligibility implemented as part of the 2011 Budget Act. Prior to 2011, new Cal Grant Award applicants had to meet income, asset, and need requirements, while renewal award applicants did not. The Budget Act of 2011 changed the determination of financial eligibility by requiring that renewal award applicants meet the same income, asset, and need requirements as new award applicants. This change has resulted in approximately 26,000 students losing their Cal Grant eligibility permanently for, in some instances, one-time increases in family income. So with this proposal, the governor's budget introduces a re-entry mechanism into the Cal Grant program for these students, assuming they regain financial eligibility. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seha. Questions from the committee? Mr. DeBobney.
Thank you all for being here today. I come from the San Fernando Valley. It's a little bit more expensive to live in the Valley as a student at Cal State Northridge and some of the other CSU campuses. Is there a way to make the system more equitable so cost of living is factored in? So if you live, let's say, in Los Angeles or another area that's a little bit higher in cost of living than one of our other more rural campuses, you might get a slightly higher or adjusted amount to try to compensate for that cost of living. And then my second question would be, I have a number of nonprofit colleges in my area that a lot of students rely on, especially with the impact that we've seen at the UC and CSU system. More students are having to look for colleges outside our public institutions. And they're also, frankly, because of the impact of the community colleges, looking to for-profit colleges as an alternative as well. What's that impact going to have on student access? And what was the reasoning behind that besides just pure budgetary stuff? Thank you.
I'll try to attempt to answer your first question in terms of the cost of living in certain areas of California. About 10 years ago, we used to do a survey called the Student Expense and Resources Survey, otherwise known as SEERS. And in that survey, we used to survey students in terms of their actual cost, what it really took to, not only on the expense side, but on the resources side. So we, unfortunately, because of the recession, didn't have the resources to do that, and that was eliminated. I really think that that survey needs to come back. What colleges do today is that they have on-campus and off-campus budgets, and those particular budgets may or may not recognize the cost. Typically, it recognizes the housing cost, and they have a food budget, and they have a transportation budget. But periodically, I do think it's really important to take a look at the real cost of what it takes in order to enroll in a college, particularly regionally.
But if you're at UCLA or UCR, you're not going to get any difference, even though it's obviously going to cost you more to live in the Westwood area than around UCR. Or you could say Northridge and Fresno, it really wouldn't matter.
And the answer is that it depends on which segment the student is attending. UC's approach to packaging financial aid is to leave a consistent level of student responsibility across campuses. It's about $9,500. So if the student has a higher cost of attendance, that student would get more aid than a student with the same amount of financial need at another institution. UC does that with their institutional aid programs. The other segments don't have as much flexibility in terms of funding for items other than tuition. The Cal Grant program is quite focused on tuition with the tuition awards. The excess awards are relatively small compared to those other costs of attendance. It's less than $1,500. So there's not a lot of flexibility within the Cal Grant program as it currently exists to address those costs. But in the overall package, there's some ability to do that.
I think your second question went to for-profits, and maybe you can restate it.
What will the impact be for student access? I mean, I think a lot of students have turned to nonprofit colleges. I mean, USC, Pepperdine in my area, and Cal Lutheran as an alternative to maybe a Cal State or a UC because of the impact and access to those schools with the budget cuts over last year. Then also because a number of students have been impacted not being able to get into community colleges, they're looking at for-profit college career paths. And I know now with the cuts to both these segments, what do you think the impact of student access will be across the system?
Well, first I wanted to just, you asked the question, part of that question was, why did that happen? I think what happened several years ago is that for the first time in California we established institutional standards, if you will, in terms of institutions having to meet a cohort default rate of no less than 15.5% and a graduation rate of at least 30%. So for the first time in the Cal Grant program, in order to participate, you had to meet those standards. So there was an elimination of a large number of for-profit institutions at that time. And in the last several years, it has also impacted certain nonprofit institutions. So there was a policy decision made in terms of the participation in the Cal Grant program and what institutions participated. In terms of the flow, in terms of where students have gone, I think there'll be other presenters that will be at the panel that can speak a little bit better than that. There needs to be more work done in this area in terms of what the actual result of those policies have meant.